I'm Tim Bradner. Welcome to Capitol Views. Today we have our Attorney General Craig Richards with us. Craig, thank you for joining us on Capitol Views.
Oh, thank you, Tim. My pleasure.
Craig, tell us about yourself, where you're from, and a bit about your career before you became Attorney General.
You bet. I'd be happy to. I grew up in Fairbanks. My family moved there when I was 2 from Georgia, about the time the pipeline came into operation in '77. And I grew up in Fairbanks. I lived in the Wood River School District, and then when Pearl Creek opened, that became my elementary school, then to Ryan, and I graduated ultimately from West Valley in '93. From there, I did my schooling in finance at the University of Virginia, then went immediately and got my law degree. So that was my majority of my schooling. After that, I came back. I clerked for Ralph Beislein in Fairbanks. And then I took my first job working at a law firm in Anchorage that does mostly public finance, municipal bonding. So as a young attorney, that's where I cut my teeth and where I worked on my first gas line project for HFC and the railroad. It was on whether you could use tax-exempt bonds to finance the pipeline. And then I did that for a couple years and ultimately ended up working with Bill Walker and was his law partner ultimately for about a dozen years, 13 years, I think.
Yeah.
And I did that until I was appointed Attorney General in December.
Yes. So you've had you've got some background in finance, in bond matters, and that's going to be an area of importance to us as we go forward toward a gas line.
Yeah, I do. I not only have an undergraduate degree in finance, I also have an MBA from Duke, where I studied finance, and particularly oil and gas finance in terms of project finance and decision modeling. Yeah. So I have a pretty heavy quant background for an attorney.
Going back to Fairbanks, what years did you live there?
Ooh, so '77 through '93 were obviously the growing up years.
Yeah.
And then about the only other time I really went back was about a year when I clerked, and then maybe a few months before and a few months after, which was 2000 and 2001. I think I started with Woolforth, Vassar, Johnson, and Breck in Anchorage in March of 2002. So since then, I've really been in Anchorage other than the time I spent in North Carolina for my MBA.
Was the pipeline just tailing off when you were there? Or do you remember the pipeline days?
I don't know, yeah. But I definitely remember the stories. I mean,
yeah.
I don't know if you were around during the '70s, but you hear the Wild West stories.
All those things leave an impression on you. Well, hopefully we'll see things pick up with a new pipeline someday. Not maybe quite like that, but and Valdez, of course, had a lot of impact from the pipeline too.
Yeah, absolutely, and the oil spill as well. Both were sort of very similar kind of mini 3-4 year booms where crime shot up, the social programs got stressed, the infrastructure got stressed, and tons of people floating around, and then it kind of goes away over time.
Yeah. Craig, a lot of your career with now Governor Walker was with his law firm representing the city of Valdez. What sorts of matters did you deal with? I'm somewhat familiar with the TAPS litigation that you folks were extensively involved in, but you did a lot of other municipal issues, I would assume.
Right. Well, the area of oil and gas where I focused on primarily was really derivative of it being a firm that did municipal law. And that municipal client happened to be the city of Valdez. And the city of Valdez, like any municipality, has hundreds of issues from dog bite cases to contracts and procurement issues to just overseeing municipal assembly meetings or council meetings in their case. But in addition, Valdez was involved in some fairly lengthy and sophisticated, almost generational litigation over the value and the amount of taxes to be paid on the Trans-Alaska Pipeline System. Because TAPS, like any property pays in the state, in a municipal area that has a property tax, pays an ad valorem tax on its value. So there was a lot of litigation about how much that tax should be and what the value of the pipeline is.
Surprised it'd be so complicated to figure out what the value of the pipeline or the terminal would be.
Well, what's amazing is that you have entities going into court that can make good faith arguments that the pipeline's worth $1 billion, and you have some going in that it's worth $15 billion. And both of them can credibly assert that those are both within the range of reason. And that's what happens when you get into valuation disputes over these sophisticated special purpose properties that are, world-class engineering marvels. How do you value something like the Trans-Alaska Pipeline System? Yeah. So that was the dispute.
Yeah, and I guess unlike a house or a piece of property, there's no market for pipelines.
Bingo,
so
that's it.
There's no way to value it.
Yeah, exactly. What makes valuing a house relatively easy is that there are a number of market transactions. You look at what did your neighbor's house sell for? What did the house down the street that's the same size, what did it sell for? And it gives you data points. There's no other Trans-Alaska Pipeline System. So using any kind of market-based analysis is a fool's errand. So You either have to value it on its income or you have to value it on what it would cost to replace. That's pretty much 10 years of litigation in a nutshell.
Yeah, it's amazing that we go on. What's the status of it now? I mean, how is it resolved?
Well, I haven't obviously been involved since I was Attorney General, but no, I'm sure I would have read in the paper if it had been resolved. So I think that they're scheduled to do another trial for tax years 2011 through 2014 before the Superior Court. And then, of course, every year there's a whole nother assessment year in process. So my guess is they're firing up to have the annual battle on 2015.
So I guess the way this works is the oil companies, which own the pipeline, have an interest in keeping the value low so that it minimizes their tax, and the municipalities would have an interest in a high value because it maximizes their property tax.
Well, I think both parties would say they have an interest in getting the right value.
Yeah,
But I won't disagree with your characterization either.
yeah. But do you come down in the middle sometimes, or does it? How do you resolve? I guess the court decides it.
Well, it's always come down in the middle. I mean, even when the value was much lower, it was never as low as the Trans-Alaska Pipeline owners said it should be. Even when the municipalities were successful, which they have been more in the recent years, it's still 2/3 of what they say it should be. So it's in a range.
Yeah, this stuff is just mystical, for somebody like myself.
Well,
Understand how it's done.
It's big money, and it drives not only local budgets, but the economics of the system. So there's a lot of incentive for complex litigation.
Well, how much? I mean, it's the majority of Valdez's revenues, isn't it?
It's a good chunk.
Yeah.
It's definitely over half, but it depends on the year.
Yeah.
Because obviously the lower the value, the less of a percentage of total collections it makes up. But
And likewise, it's important for Fairbanks and also the North Slope Borough also.
yeah, well, yeah, exactly. It's a major part of both of their budgets as well. Not quite the same percentages of Valdez, but certainly for Fairbanks, it's the largest taxpayer by leaps and bounds.
So Greg, just as we finish up, did you handle any other cases for the city? Any dog bite cases?
I don't think I actually did the dog bite cases, although Bill Walker certainly did, and Joe Levesque and another attorney by the name of Jack Wakeland handled all the valuations. So you'd go from I'm sorry, not valuations, violations. So you would go from a hearing where you're doing billion-dollar tax cases to a hearing where somebody's dog bit somebody and you get a $100 ticket.
Well, anyway, thank you very much, Greg, for being with us. Thanks for joining us. I'm Tim Bradner. Thank you for joining us on Capitol News.